We're live. Friends, welcome to the first webinar on sanitation and fecal sludge management, which is being organized by um, Asian Development Bank Institute and Be Wastewise with support from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Um, so we already have all the speakers with us. We have Professor Chari. We'll start the first interview with him. And then we have Jeremy Horner. Professor Chari is joining us from Hyderabad and Administrative Staff College of India. And then we'll have a panel discussion with Jeremy Horner and Habibur Rahman from the Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor. Jeremy is joining us from London. Habib is joining us from Dhaka. And Gautam Katta is joining us from Pune Municipal Corporation. And finally, we'll have an interview with Josephine Antonio. She's joining us from Dumaguete, Philippines. So I'll hide everyone else from the broadcast, and we'll begin with Professor Chari's interview. Guys, see you in a few minutes after Professor Chari. And just give me 1 minute. All right, there we go. We're ready. Now, there has been a lot of talk about implementing solutions, non-sewered sanitation and fecal sludge management, and implementing the solutions. But the pace of implementation has been really slow in Asian cities, and because of which the citizens are suffering from deterioration of public health, quality of life, and the environment, because the cities do not have the capacity to build sanitation systems and institutionalize solutions. So this event will inspire action and provide practical steps for city leaders. And we hope to continue doing these kind of events where they get an opportunity to talk to other leaders in the sector and exchange knowledge. Professor Chari, welcome to the event, and thanks for being a contributor again on Be Wastewise. Could you tell us a little background about the work that you're doing?
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Ranjit and friends. My name is Srinivas Chari. I'm one of the directors at Administrative Staff College of India. I head the Water and Sanitation program at ASCII, which is a public policy institute. Our work is currently, apart from national level engagement with the ministries, but we also closely work with the government of Andhra Pradesh and also city of Warangal, which is in Telangana state of India, one of the newly formed states in India. So our work is basically to not just advocate for non-sewer sanitation, but also facilitate policy as well as implementation support in the province of, in the state of Andhra Pradesh. So having about 110 municipalities of different sizes. So we work in sort of helping governments in developing state level policies on FSM, non-sewer sanitation, then developing capacity building programs for municipalities to understand and appreciate the need for looking at disruptive solutions, particularly in the context of fecal sludge and septage management, and also help them in operationalizing. In Andhra Pradesh, we are looking at public-private partnership model, hybrid annuity models for establishing the fecal sludge treatment plants and regulating the whole sector from containment all the way to the treatment and disposal. So that's a nature of work that we are engaged in, and we have excellent partnership with both professional consulting firms as well as NGOs and of course national foundations like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and others.
Right. Thank you very much. I mean, I see that that is quite a broad scope of work. So could you talk to us specifically about the work that you did in Warangal, where you've already implemented solutions? Could you tell us what was the situation before you started, and what was the component of NSSFSM that you implemented there?
Yeah, city of Warangal is the second largest city in the province of Telangana, in the state of Telangana, after Hyderabad. The population is about close to a million. Being a million plus city, it has no underground sewerage system. There's no underground sewerage system with almost 35% of open defecation when we started our work. That was in 2014-15, and there were a lot of insanitary toilets discharging directly into the drains, and the whole desludging process of these septic tanks and pits were totally unregulated, and the waste was discarded in water bodies. The city has about 40 plus drinking water bodies which are used for potable and non-potable applications, and they were getting contaminated because of the disposal of septage. And there was no regulation at the city level, both from containment, how to construct a toilet. There were no capacities in terms of what are the design standards. There was no regulation in terms on the private sector who were doing the desludging, and the waste was disposed uh, come quietly, in an erratic manner across the length and breadth of the city, based on the availability of space. And so that was the context within which the work has started. And the first thing that we started off with is to think through strategically in terms of what should be the vision for the city, and the consultative processes led to a common understanding that the city should look at approaches of non-sewer sanitation than look at a sewerage system, for the simple reason that there was, one is a cost implication, second is a lack of availability of water supply to drive the sewerage system, and also openness to look at disruptive technology solutions rather than a very conventional hydraulic reticulated models. So the city was open to looking at alternate approaches, and that led to a common understanding that yes, let's look at non-sewer sanitation. So the first
When
thing,
was this?
this this was in 2015-16. So
Okay.
this was the work has we stepped in the city around 2015, and then the consultation processes, the diagnostic, the advocacy was for a 6 month period between 15-16. That's a time period we are talking about. So
Mm.
the city, first thing the city did in 2016 was to introduce what is called the fecal sludge management regulation. This was not a national drive, this was not a state drive, but the city took a conscious decision through their own council resolution that yes, this sector needs regulation. This is one area that we need to carefully regulate, both from containment all the way to treatment and disposal, including conversion of insanitary toilets to sanitary toilets. So
Okay.
that's a time, is the first, I would say, the first city in the country in India to have introduced FSM regulation at the city level. Subsequently, the national policy came out, and many states have introduced statewide regulation, statewide policy and regulatory framework. But City of Warangal started off with this exercise. Following that regulation, which was a driving force for the subsequent work, uh, the first thing that city did was to look at enhancing access. Access was a big issue in the city because of lack of access to toilets, lack of access to individual as well as public conveniences. So the city went on with leveraging the Swachh Bharat program, the Clean India program, taking advantage of the program which triggered off at the same time. It started providing individual toilets, and they have established what is called a sanitation helpline, which basically to a single point interface for urban poor and everybody else to access an individual household sanitation provision, as made available under Swachh Bharat Clean India program, whether
So,
it's a subsidy. Yeah, please go ahead.
what's available now? So you started in 2015. So what have you accomplished since then? You have the
Yeah,
regulatory process and the consultative process that has already happened. So
yeah.
what happened
So
after that?
the quick achievements are as follows. Number one, the city is open defecation free now, so they have provided access to toilets across. Uh, they are designed as per the CPHO norm. The toilet containments are designed through the training of masons, and the toilet builders have been trained so that the containment systems were designed as per that. That's number one. Second is the city has built more than 45 public toilets on public-private partnership model through social enterprise and public-private partnership model. Again, this is very critical to contain open defecation. Third thing that the city did was to regulate the desludging operators, because right now without regulation it is bordering on the manual scavenging, because the operators were not using personal protective equipment, they were not wearing gloves, they were not wearing PPE equipment, and there was no tracking of information. So city has introduced what is called a regulation for transportation and disposal of the truck movement, which is currently run by the privates. So what they did was the city has introduced a mobile app for tracking the desludging operation, and all the trucks are now empaneled and they carry GPS devices, so we know exactly where the truck movement is, and then they record which house got desludged. That helps in introducing what is called scheduled desludging. So that's the second intervention. The third intervention is they have established a fecal sludge treatment plant, which is based on pyrolysis method. So this is a very compact 20 kiloliter treatment facility, which is a pilot project. In fact, the city needs more. However, they started with 20 KL capacity FSTP. So the waste is now going to the fecal sludge treatment plant, and the waste coming out of the treatment plant is recycled. The city calls it as a sanitation resource park, because it's also creating awareness about how the sanitation works. So a lot of children, a
Okay.
lot of citizens come there and see how the FSTP
Hmm.
works.
So, is all of the city being served right now with this system?
The city is completely served with the system.
Okay.
However, once we have the scheduled desludging in place, the expectation is that the more quantity, large quantity of waste septage would be coming out of the households. So
Mm.
the city needs one more facility. So the city has floated a tender right now for co-treatment of municipal solid waste and the fecal waste through biomethanation. So it's
Okay.
becoming sort of a hub for sanitation innovation.
Right, right. Okay. For the next few minutes, I'd like to talk about the scaling up of
Yeah.
this work to other towns and in India. But before that, we have a question from Nikhil. He's asking, was the city Warangal able to leverage economy of scales while building toilets on a city level as compared to when an individual tries to get access to the toilet facility?
Not really. It went through an individual mechanism. It's not aggregating citizens and then giving it to a single contract. No, because the Swachh Bharat mission actually gave options for individuals to access subsidies and build the toilets. So what city did was to empanel the toilet builders and left that choice to individual households, how they would like to take the toilet building forward. Citizens opted for individual masons, individual toilet builder. They paid through the subsidies are paid directly.
Right. And one more question. Throughout this, what's the financial infrastructure that's behind this? I mean, how is it financed? Yeah, could you talk about that a little bit?
As far as the individual house toilets are concerned, it's financed through a combination of national subsidy, as we call Swachh Bharat subsidy, of 4,000 rupees, and on top of it, the state provided another 12,000. So there is a sufficient subsidy made available for individual toilets. When it comes to the public toilets, the city opted for complete public-private partnership route. There was absolutely no financing from the city government. All they have given was access to land and access to lease of particular piece of land, and and they regulated the tariff in terms of user charges, and that's it, and service level standards.
Mm-hmm.
So with regard to containment, it's totally the private sector as well as the central government subsidy, central state government subsidy. As
Mm.
far as the transportation, it's again private sector. the city is only regulating it. With regard to FSTP, it's a combination of because it's an innovation. It came as a grant for establishing FSTP, but operation and maintenance is taken care by the city government.
Okay.
But the subsequent scaling up is through completely by the city government.
Okay. And do you take any feedback from people? Were you collecting feedback before the project and after, to understand, the kind of satisfaction that they have with the new systems?
So every facility has a citizen feedback gadget. It's an instrument which has smileys. So it will actually directly connected to GPRS device. So whether it is a S line or whether it is a public toilet facility, there is a citizen interface touch point which citizens have to can access and give a feedback on the rating of the facility, and then it gets aggregated at the city level. So it's totally IT enabled system.
Okay, okay. And you were talking about being open defecation free. I mean, we know that certified open defecation free and actual the practice are two different things, but that is definitely a step forward. I will be talking more about that with Gautam from Pune Municipal Corporation. But now, could you talk about the driving force behind the work in Warangal? I mean, where was the leadership coming from? Who was, bringing people together and then getting this done?
I think in my view, the driving force was a combination of state leadership and the city leadership. City leadership in terms of mayor and the city commissioner, and the state leadership at the secretary level. So they
Okay.
played a very critical role. But let me also highlight the point that the leadership came to a common understanding because of the evidence that institutions like ASCII has generated over a period of 4 to 5 months, and to
Mm.
show them how water bodies and how public health was getting affected because of unregulated fecal sludge management systems.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Now, can you talk about the scaling up of this initiative to other towns? Where are you in the process?
The scaling up is actually pretty rapid than what we have anticipated, and we are unable to manage the scaling up process. So let me be honest.
Is that a
So
good thing?
so I think it's a good thing, but at the same time we need to be extremely cautious about this because of two reasons. One is about the quality of service. It's not just a treatment plant, but we need to really take care of the whole process of regulation, advocacy, as well as capacities of the service delivery organization, in this case municipalities, and institutional strengthening. So it's so easy to scale up by installing FSTPs all over. So right now, just to speak about the scaling up, I'm going to switch to a different state where we work very quickly. We started a similar exercise in a town called Narsapur in Andhra Pradesh. Looking at the success of that, the state took a view that we should scale up for all 110 towns. So that happened in a short span of 2 months. So imagine from one town where this FSTP was built and regulation got implemented, the state took a view that it is a great idea, it's disruptive, so let's scale up to all 110 towns. The process is underway. The big challenge is who are going to manage these FSTPs in 110 towns? Where is the capacity in the private sector? So how do we ensure that the private sector not only just builds a facility but also maintains them for the next 10 years? So that's where we are looking at public-private partnership approaches. It's completely new approach that we have taken in the context of fecal sludge non-sewer sanitation.
Okay. And talking about Warangal, the work in Warangal and also in Narsapur, um, are there any incentives for durability and universality of these services? Are they strong enough, these incentives? I think that will be really useful to keep it going on the long term and to kind of institutionalize this change.
I
Um,
think the biggest incentive is a political incentive in terms of
for the city
bringing
leaders.
for the city leaders,
Okay.
because it's the waste is all over, and then now it is treated, contained. So they can showcase that during their leadership, during their tenure, they could really fix the problem in a very short span of time, and without digging the roads for sewerage systems, without struggling to raise finances. So this is something they can do it very quickly. They can demonstrate to the city citizens that they have done a great job in
Mm.
improving the public health outcomes. So that's one. And for the state leadership too, because they're able to really meet the public health goals by spending maybe 1/100th of the cost of a sewerage system, or not delaying the provision of sanitation services by generations, hoping that some money will fall somewhere for sewerage system.
Mm-hmm. Is the change visible?
I would say the change is palpable. It's definitely visible, but it's also palpable
Okay.
uh, in the sense, but we cannot say that the work is complete. There's a long way to go. We need to deal with the gray water. We need to deal with many of those loose ends in the system. But I
Right.
think it's a
Could you
great.
talk about that? Could you tell our audience maybe very quickly what you've achieved and what is still there yet to be achieved? But before that, I have some more questions. But before that, we have questions coming up on the live feed. So one question from is from Vijaya, and he or she is asking on which clause or rule in the municipal act are the regulations for FSM anchored?
It's a very simple thing. One need not have within the municipal system. One need not have a regulatory framework. There is a public health provision under every municipal act. So one can refer to the public health component of municipal act and then bring out a number of rules under the act. So without tampering with the act, we can bring out set of rules under the act to ensure public health can be improved, and that's how FSM can seamlessly fit into any of the municipal acts in any state.
Right. So the city leaders already have provisions to be able to do this under the act.
Absolutely.
Okay.
but
Okay.
rules but rules have to be introduced, and rules needs to be approved by the political system, and that's what we need to go through.
Okay. Okay. All right. And I had another question about the um, willingness to pay from users and also the financial incentives for the private sector. But before that, can you talk to us about what I asked earlier, which is briefly tell us what you've achieved and what are you yet to achieve? I mean, because when it comes to political visibility for initiatives, there is a possibility where it could just get washed over saying that it's a grand success, but then there is not much discussion about what else needs to happen. So could you talk to us about that?
So on a scale of 1 to 10, one can say the achievement is about 3 or 4. I mean, to be honest. So
Okay.
there's a long way to go. So it's easy to glorify that we have done everything and then we set up a FSTP. It doesn't mean anything. So I would say I mean, it's not even half glass full. So it is still a long way to go. What things that have to be achieved, I would say about 3 or 4 things. Number one, there's sizable insanitary toilets in the system. In any urban system in India, there's sizable insanitary toilets actually not designed. In fact, they let out directly into the drains. And how do you convert them? How do you incentivize households? How do you regulate them? How do you force them to convert insanitary to sanitary systems? The space is a constraint. So in a city like Warangal, there, for example, there's sizable insanitary toilets, so we're working on it. If you look at shit flow diagram, insanitary toilets is a big red block. So that's one piece of work that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Second is this whole scheduled desludging is is a is something we need to really fix it. There's
Okay.
uh, though there are guidelines, there are CPHO manuals and EPA, US EPA talks about scheduled desludging. Every city, every context has different time zone, time periods, 2 years, 3 years, 1 year. But
Okay.
there's no scientific evidence. So we are building evidence to say that the toilet septic tanks have to desludge every 2 years or every 1 year or every 3 years. So we are
Okay.
building right now evidence on that. The
Okay.
third thing that we need to really strengthen is the toilets that are going to be built in the future. They have to be smart enough instead of just uh, releasing the water, releasing the septage out. Can we think of technologies which would actually reduce the problem at the containment level? So I would say in one is a legacy, but how about the future? So we need to start looking at really disruptive technologies on the containment side, and that's what we are working on right now.
Mm-hmm. I have two questions from our audience, which are similar, so I'll put them to you. But friends, so we have another less than 5 minutes. Is actually about 4 minutes with Professor Chari. So if you have any questions, use the chat box and get them answered from him. And the two questions, one is from Nikhil and another is from Amrita, is that what are the measures for sustained willingness to pay from users? Do you see this as a challenge when you scale up? That's one. And that's also my question, what kind of strong long-term incentives, financial incentives are there for the private sector? And the next question from Amrita is, do customers pay directly to the emptying service providers? And how is the treatment plant funded?
Yeah. So, with regard to the willingness to pay, there is already there's a private sector in both the states that where we work. The private sector is already collecting directly from the citizens through a user charge, desludging charge. So there is already, I would say, there's no choice, so citizens pay. So of course there is set of competition. The best part is that the price point may come down because of the regulation and because of the increased market for the private operator. So that's one thing where we are negotiating with the private operators to reduce the price because of the competition that we bring in. We're also bringing on the lines of Senegal bidding process. Citizens will get information about multiple service providers and they can negotiate price with them. So there are different, this is a work in progress. So to answer your question, yes, there is a willingness to pay. The question is, how about willingness to pay for the incremental cost for treatment? Right now there is only for desludging. So right now the treatment cost is taken care by the municipality by itself, and it's paid out of their property tax because there is a sanitation component in the property tax collection system. So it's a tax based model that we are looking at it. As far as the desludging is concerned, private sector is already getting paid by the citizens.
Mm-hmm. All right, all right. And so, 2 more minutes before we end the interview. Could you tell why you said it was not even glass half full? You put it at three. Um,
I said four.
3 to 4. Why is that so?
I mean, I think it's easy to say we have done it. See, there are two, three reasons. One is there's gray water. Right now, we are talking about, of course, a lethal component of the whole sanitation is a septage that's been taken care of or is being taken care of. But there is also gray water which is contaminated with some amount of fecal waste. So that needs to be addressed. So we need to find solutions to deal with the gray water. That's number one. Number two, I mentioned about insanitary toilets. Number three is about improving the containment system for the future. We can't have bad containment and set up a FSTP. I think is rather I would have best containment and minimize the need for a very highly priced and highly sized fecal sludge treatment plant. So
Okay,
that's why I said uh, from a research perspective, there's a lot to do, a lot to achieve. But
right.
it's a great progress.
Okay. One final question before we end this. How can cities get in touch with you if they need help?
So cities can write to us. My email ID is, I think, is made available to all of you, and then we will. Yeah, I think the best thing I would say is to visit some of these places that I'm referring to. Seeing is believing, and interacting with the city leadership, I think, will give much more insight and confidence. Of course,
Okay.
we are here to facilitate the process.
Okay. We have some more questions, but we'll put them to the next panelists. Professor Chari, thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you.
hopefully, we'll continue this series and then we'll have continuous contributions from you. So, thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Mr. Thank you, Mr.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, friends. So that was Professor Srinivasachari from the Administrative Staff College of India. He joined us from Hyderabad. Now I'll be bringing Jeremy Horner and Habibur Rahman from Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor, and Gautam Katta from the Pune Municipal Corporation online. So give me just 1 minute and you'll see all of them here. Hi, Jeremy.
There we are. Hello.
There, hey. Habib, hello. Just making sure if all the systems are still working. Gautam, hi. Can you hear us? Everything's fine?
Hi, Ranjit. Yeah, all good.
Habib, same with you. Habib, I think you're on mute.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay, all right, wonderful, great. Thanks, guys. Let me now hide Professor Chari. All right. Now, okay, so again, now we have a panel discussion with Jeremy, Habib, and Gautam, and the processes in their cities are further down the process. Well, the systems in their cities are further down the process. So we'll talk about that on that implementation. If you have any questions, use the live chat window below your video stream, and we'll get them answered. But before that, friends, welcome. And could you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing in Dhaka? Jeremy, maybe you could start.
Yes, certainly. Hello, everybody. Good to join you. So the work in Dhaka that we're doing, it's working with vacuum tankers. So previously, Dhaka, well, at the moment, Dhaka is about 20% sewered, and the remainder, so a city of about 18 million, and the remainder of the city has no access to sewered sanitation, and so there's septic tanks and pits. Now, what we've been doing is trying to introduce vacuum tankers. Previously, they haven't been present in the city, so everything is done by manual emptying. So we've been working with the Dhaka WASA, which is the water utility, and city corporations to be able to introduce a vacuum tanker system that is licensed in a kind of public-private partnership method. So the tankers are owned by the city corporation and are leased out to private operators. So we've been working to introduce that, to work both with the water utility, as I say, Dhaka WASA, and now with the city authorities, so that they are open to that kind of that method of operation. We have found that they've had vacuum tankers but haven't wanted to reorganize their workforce and reorganize their operating methods in order to run them themselves. And so that we're trying to mobilize that.
Okay. Habib, could you tell us a little bit about your work in Dhaka right now? What kind of service coverage or was there before you started, and what is it now? Could you talk to us, give us some background?
Yeah, actually, before introducing this service, so the traditional pit emptier, so what we called sweepers, so they provide pit emptying service manually using the bucket or something like that. And after that, local NGO DSK, so they actually introduced mechanical emptying service using vacuum tanker, not commercial basis, something you can call it charity basis actually. So after that, so the Dhaka WASA, Water Supply and Sewerage Authority, so they are the utility of Ministry of Local Government Division. So they received 2 vacuum tanker from UNICEF, and then the Dhaka Water Supply and Sewerage Authority, actually they are responsible for providing water supply to the city dollars, and as well they have also network-based sewerage system in 20% almost 20% of households and institutions. But rest 80% depends on on-site sanitation. But clear was not, it was not clear the mandate. That's why, so Diwasha didn't provide. So after that, so they seek our support to make the operationalize of the 2 vacuum tanker what they received from UNICEF, and we provided, all sort of technical backstopping support to Dhaka Water Supply and Sewerage Authority. And now, under the PPP arrangement, we are now providing, fecal sludge emptying and transporting service in Dhaka. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Gautam, could you talk to us about what's happening in Pune and, give us some background?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Gautam. I work with Commissioner Pune. So I'm a part of something called War Room. I'm not a sanitation guy per se, but I'm involved in understanding and putting in architecture and holistic planning for the city, and sanitation plays a very important part thanks to the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan program introduced in 2014. Yeah, so in contrast to the Dhaka, Warangal, as Professor Chari was mentioning, Pune is blessed with more than 95% of sewerage network. Yeah, the problem is that we have installed treatment capacity of 477 MLD, which is basically around 55% of the generated capacity. So what it means is we have the sewerage network, but we are short on the treatment capacity, right? So I'm working towards, that's one dimension. I'm working towards helping the city in setting up another 396 MLD capacity by establishing 11 STPs around the city with the aid of JICA. So it's a 1,000 crore project. Yeah, we've finished the DPR, which is detailed project report. So it's gonna go on the anvil very soon. So in probably 3 to 5 years from now, we're gonna have 100% sewerage network with 100% treatment capacity. That's one part of it. And we watch closely the other aspect of the lack of sanitation infrastructure to the people of the city. In view of the rapid urbanization, there are pockets of city where there are high density of people conglomerating at a place, and they have no access to the infrastructure part of it. So under the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, we made a huge exercise in identifying these pockets of the city and did our best to provide sanitation infrastructure to these guys and the households, and we did the best we could. Especially the constraints was in terms of space because of the settlements. The third aspect is we've identified a lot of households to be to have a ballpark. It's more than 42,000 households, and provided them individual household toilets under Swachh Bharat Abhiyan again, under the model Professor Chari was mentioning before. Yeah, and another aspect of what we try to do is how to improve sanitation in terms of creation of public toilets. And the top of the thing which is there on the mind right now is not the installation or creation of these facilities, but the operations and maintenance of these facilities. I would put that to where I'm dealing with sanitation in Pune.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. When you said war room, I just wanted to ask immediately what were your weapons, but I think that we can talk about that later. Jeremy and Habib, could one of you talk about what have you accomplished until now, and what are you yet to accomplish? And could you put that in a project timeline for the audience so that they understand, when it started, where are you, and then where do you have to go?
Okay. Shall I start, and then I'll pass over to Habib? That'll be probably best. So, started in 2015, and we've been working with a single entrepreneur in the city. So we're only really scratching the surface in Dhaka at the moment. 2 vacuum tankers in a city of 16 to 18 million is tiny proportion. However, within 5 months of the entrepreneur starting, they were already in profit on an OPEX basis. So they were able to operate and actually be a visible proof of being able to show the service worked. We had quite a lot of difficulty at the start finding a suitable entrepreneur who was willing to take on a job in a new sector that they hadn't visibility of. Now that's really important when we've a year ago now, so 12 months ago, we started also working in Chittagong. So we started trying to see if the model worked elsewhere, and that's been running for a year. Interestingly, in Chittagong, we had a significantly higher number of entrepreneurs who were interested in seeing the work, some of them from Dhaka as well. So they'd seen it could work well. We're now beginning to look at where we can mobilize more entrepreneurs, mobilize more tankers, and that's we're seeing in the next 3 to 4 years. We're going to be looking at both Dhaka and Chittagong and 2 other cities as well, Rangpur and Barashal. Okay. So we're beginning to work in other cities as well as ramping up the size of what we're doing in Dhaka. But bearing in mind that what we've managed is just the transportation, so the collection, transportation, and safe disposal. But there are, of course, other items along the sanitation chain that we still need to work on. Right. And we're still working with the city corporation. But key to that has been ensuring that the mandate and the legislation is in place and correct. So we've been working on that in the process as well. And that's really beginning to move things along.
Okay. Habib, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. So actually, in the span of last 3 years, so this is good thing for us that we have demonstrated FSN service delivery model under the PPP arrangement, what we call actually SWIFT. It's a brand name, and this is actually the successful model, and that is widely accepted by the government bodies, private sector, and the customers as well. And recently, in the last year 2017, we have replicated this model in Chittagong and Rangpur as well, and but what we need to actually yet to accomplish, that is the sellable in product and the make market for it. So this is the challenge now we have. So yeah.
And Jeremy and Habib, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned you also mentioned it now that it was really difficult to bring entrepreneurs from to become part of this because it's a completely new sector in the country. Could you talk about that process of engaging the entrepreneurs? And before that, another very pertinent question: how is all of this work funded? Where is the funding coming from, and how permanent are these solutions? Who would like to take that question?
Yep, I'm happy to start on that question, and maybe I'll pass across to Habib a little bit. So originally, it was funded through a grant process. So as Habib mentioned, the tankers were donated by UNICEF, and we were able to provide some marketing support through Bill and Melinda Gates grant. So it was a donation type basis to begin the work. Certainly needed buy-in from the city authorities as well. So they put in their time and resources. But now that it's operating fully in Dhaka, we're providing some additional marketing in order to ramp up, in order to replicate the work. But on an OPEX basis, the entrepreneur is running, he's running in profit, and also within the city authorities, their support, they're receiving a lease fee as well. So there's 2 different income streams. So actually, that's actually operating now on a really solid basis.
All right. Habib, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Jeremy covered everything. So, yeah.
All right, great. Great, wonderful. So Jeremy, could you also talk about bringing in entrepreneurs from other sectors? Yeah,
certainly. When we were targeting entrepreneurs, we were having a lot of difficulty finding entrepreneurs who had either sufficient business understanding and business background, or who had an understanding of what is in effect a distribution process, a logistics process as well. In Dhaka, we worked with somebody who was actually in the cleaning business already, and they were cleaning offices. So we were able to cross-sell what we were able to, I suppose, to propose to them that it was an opportunity to cross-sell their product. They could be cleaning offices, and at the same time, they could be offering the emptying of the tanks as well. So finding the right entrepreneur was very difficult at the initial stages, but bringing them on board and actually providing it being a visible a visible business that was making a profit, and it received quite a lot of publicity, has really helped stir people's interest. I think in the longer time, just looking forwards, perhaps there's certainly the opportunity for entrepreneurs now to begin to invest, and that's because of the clarity of the mandate within the government as well.
Okay, I'll ask you more about the profit model, because I understand that you'll have to balance between paying customers and customers who might not be able to pay. But I'll ask you about that after we speak to Gautam. Gautam, could you talk to us about your role? I mean, are you a city employee? And what's a war room? I mean, how did all of this start? Why did the commissioner think there was a need for a war room?
All right, I am not on the rolls of Pune Municipal Corporation, but the commissioner wanted a body of professionals who can aid him with integrated program management. So there are a lot of people working with the city, and Pune City Connect was one organization, and he had a conversation with them that if they could fund a setup who can bring the people who are city biased rather than to be so there are a lot of consultants who work with us, but everybody has a certain used path. Generally, they try to put things as to how things should go. So he wanted a group of guys who can be city biased in thinking and executing things. So that's how it is. So we work directly with Commissioner in furthering and accelerating the pace of the smaller projects, and try to put an integrated architecture in the planning process itself. So that's how it is.
Okay. And could you you mentioned that Pune is open defecation free. So could you talk about that? And even Professor Chari mentioned that for Warangal. So could you talk about the certification process and what it actually means?
Okay, OD free, I guess, is the basic building block for some standard of sanitation in every city. It's unfortunately, Indian cities are getting up to that and getting this certified. Pune was certified open OD free in January 2017. This process consists of three dimensions. One, what does OD free mean? It means that every household where there is a feasibility of space should have a household toilet. Two, every household who doesn't have the feasibility of setting up a toilet in their own house should have an access to one of the toilets. It generally are community toilets in and around 500 meters. And three, there should be a toilet access within 1 kilometer of every major public community space. So this is the definition of OD, right? Okay. And how is it certified? You, as a city, so what we have done is the first thing we wanted to do and done is do a gap analysis as to what is the baseline, or what is that, or where is that we need to build some of these toilets. So on an entire city basis, Pune Corporation have done a survey. It's a house-to-house survey, and we've evolved a gap of 43,000 households plus, with the feasibility to set up a household toilet. Right. As Professor Chari was mentioning, the financial structure is a little bit different here, and as you are questioning, we had applied the scale of economies of scale to kick in our process. We have done a little process innovation. One, because central government is contributing 4,000, state was contributing 6,000, we were contributing 8,000. So we could tweak the process a little bit to make a contract, and we are making a household sign on that, which says that, dude, you don't worry, you are gonna hand over your right to build a toilet to the city. So we've empaneled, the builders and the masons, through which we got economies of scale, and we have put these service level agreements and the standards, which has to be uniformly followed. And to put this, to protect the integrity of this very big program, we've co-opted NGOs like Shelter, Samagra, and we appointed an independent third-party audit to audit all these facilities and certify that these are well and good, ready to use. Right. And the third aspect which kicks in is the audit by the central government, the government of India. there is an organization called Quality Council of India, the team which comes from Delhi, see whether your paperwork is in order, see some of the facilities you built, and they do random sampling of physical checkup of OD practice in the city, and then is when the certification happens.
Okay.
So yeah, this is the process, and we're glad that we came through, and this has to be renewed every 6 months, so as not to let the city authorities lose focus on this very important component.
Right.
So since then we've been renewing a certification.
Okay. So definitely Pune has all the infrastructure that's required, and I think it's a great first step, towards moving towards the practice of complete open defecation. So I'll talk more about how it started and where you're going and what kind of driving forces there are. But before that, I'll go back to Jeremy and Habib and talk about. What was the question? We were talking about. So, Jeremy, so could you talk about the implementation process a little bit, the overall implementation?
Sure. Well, let me pass across to Habib and let him have a, because I've been speaking and first so far.
Yeah.
So
Habib, yeah.
So, so implementation process for what actually? Could you please?
For the overall program, how did it start?
So actually, we are the water and sanitation for the urban poor. So we work for the urban poor. So if you look at the sanitation value chain, that is containment, emptying, transportation, treatment, and disposal. So regarding the containment, so in Dhaka actually, so most of the households have the septic tank. And they need the emptying service. So but in case of the low-income community, so they have septic tank, but septic tank sometimes are not contain the waste adequately. So and are typically emptied infrequently, not frequently. So what we do actually, so and in some extent in Dhaka, the mostly slums are so densely populated, and even the access paths are so narrow that vacuum tanker, the means of viable emptying technology at this moment in Dhaka, are not accessible in those areas. So we provide some sort of a small bore sewer inside the the slum, and then we suggest or provide some sort of common septic tank just next to the door, so that next to the road, so that vacuum tanker can easily empty the sludge from the low-income community, particularly for the inaccessible areas. So what we actually did over the last 3 years, so we basically provide some sort of technical backstopping support to service provider, particularly the technical, the capacity building service to utility and city authority, and the service provider, MTR or operator as well. So in case of operator, we provide some sort of business planning, business development, and operation management related training and support, and the market promotion as well. The demand creation and market promotion support as well we provide. And in case of city authority or utility, so we provide some sort of training to the contract management, and the regulatory monitoring. So these are our process actually. So in this way we are working to introduce the FSM service in the city.
Who's operating the entire, not operating, but who's running the entire operation? Is city directly involved in doing this?
Yeah, actually the city corporation is responsible for operating the fecal sludge management service. And city corporation is doing this, and we are providing the support to city corporation. But in case of Dhaka actually, so Dhaka is a mega city, and Dhaka Water Supply and Sewerage Authority before actually the institutional regulatory framework for fecal sludge management that has been approved last few months back actually, so last 2017. So before that actually institutional mandate was not clear. So that time the DWASA, Dhaka Water Supply and Sewerage Authority. So they took initiative to provide FSM service by vacuum tanker, and accordingly we provided support to Dhaka Water Supply and Sewerage Authority. But now, and even the other 3 cities, Rangpur, Barishal, and Chittagong, so we are directly providing to the city authority support.
Okay. All right.
I think it's probably just worth, sorry, just very briefly, just clarifying that Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor is an organisation. We don't normally get involved in provision or building of taps and toilets. We're very much of a way of supporting city authorities and supporting. So that's why we've taken this approach.
Right. No, I understand that you've done a lot of groundwork. I mean, the way international aid works these days has changed quite a bit. You've done a lot of groundwork that was required to, move in and help the city. We'll talk about that after, again, talking to Gautam. But before that, could you tell us about the financing for the operator? Because I know it's like kind of a it's kind of cheating, you take from people who can pay and then kind of subsidize the poor.
Well,
could you talk about that?
Yes, certainly. I think with all these things, in Bangladesh, everything is negotiable on price. What we find is we have 2 different price structures. So we have a higher price structure in a medium or a high income area, or certainly if it's an industrial business. And then we have a much lower price for low income areas. So there's a differential pricing structure. And the way we regulate that is within the contract. There is a target percentage, so 30% of the customers need to come from a low-income community, and we've priced that. So we have, okay, so that's regulated by the city authority. They receive all of the business details from the tanker operator. They see where the customers are, because we're beginning to build this kind of a toilet database, so or a tank database, septic tank database. So that what's happening is we had to define what we said was a low-income community, and whether we did quite a lot of research on whether we do that by tank size or by tank different variables. In essence, we came down to doing it purely by geographical location. So 30% of the customers have to be from a low-income community, and there's a fine base on that. So it's a commercial driver for the operator. We did quite a lot of financial modelling to show what kind of profit margins the tanker operator could have, still working at that 30% basis. And in the low-income communities, the price is slightly more than the manual emptier, but it's actually quite it's a very nominal addition. And it's about, I'd say there's probably about a 50% difference, so it's about a 50% increment up in a higher income area.
Okay, all right. Gautam, we have a question. I think this is best for you, but if Jeremy or Habib, if you'd like to respond to it, just let me know and then I'll ask you. So it's a question from Martin. He's asking, in the sanitation chain, do you see a place for community scale processing of sewage sludge into electricity? And as you respond to that, could you also talk to us about the STP the treatment plant that you're setting up right now? Could you talk to us about the technology there?
Oh, well, for what Martin asks, see, there is one constraint in India, especially when you're producing electricity. The sole consumer for electricity in India today is government. So what does that that does is puts a price cap because you're in a non-negotiable position, right? But yes, we have some of the plants producing electricity, but for now we are powering some of the city infrastructure with that. But we are exploring right now, and the new STPs that you mentioned, the new treatment plants, we are exploring the options of processing solid and liquid waste together. Yeah, can you hear me there?
I can, but there is some background noise. Is that from you?
Yeah, no, I thought there was a disturbance, right?
Okay, all right, go ahead.
We go. Yeah. So we are trying to draw proposals from people who can produce, process solid and liquid waste together, which has scope for greater energy production. But yeah, that's a work in progress. It needs to be processed further to get a response on that, to see whether where we stand on that.
Okay, okay. That was about community scale processing, is it?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Someone's phone is ringing, but that's okay. So, could you talk to us about the implementation of the OD-free status? I mean, what are you doing right now to make it completely OD-free, and what's the timeline that you have in mind? Because I know it's a difficult
Right.
implementation.
See, I think for all the audience here, when I say the city is OD free, it doesn't mean that 100% of the population have access to toilet and use the toilet. Right.
Yeah,
Access to
use and
toilet,
access are
yes.
two different
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah. So access is one which will get us an OD free, but there is a very big component of IEC, which we call information, education and communication, to induce behavioral change on the general population to change their behaviors in accessing this and this infrastructure. So our next target right now is OD plus, which says your 80% of population of the city should have an access to individual household toilet. But yeah, that would be a work in progress, because primarily we are working on IEC, and we are working on something called a smart sanitation project for the city. This is because traditionally the way we address sanitation is generally you look at it as a cost to the city. You traditionally there is an annual budget, you ask for, you get the budgets, and you put we wanted to bring a little structure and analysis to this entire process of devolution of funds and building your assets. So right now I have a lot of community toilets, a lot of public toilets for which I have no data on to see whether they're good, what is the feedback, and how should I allocate my resources to some of these projects, to some of these resources. So we are partnered with an NGO called TBC, which is Toilet Board Coalition of Switzerland. They're working with us to generate data on the sanitation infrastructure assets of the city. Right, as a part of Smart Cities mission, we are setting up something called Integrated Command Control Center. We want data to flow from every one of our sanitation asset back to the Command Control Center, which will aid as major decision making tool. So that would help us actually understand what is the usage statistics, what is the feedback, and how should I allocate my resources in or reallocate some of them in taking away some of the existing things. So on and so forth. We are in the process of bringing a structure and analysis to this entire process of funding this part of the thing. And as I said, next target is ODF within the next 18 months is what we're looking at. ODF plus, which is 80% of the people. Again, when you see, it's not a sanitation vertical planning. So if there are concentrated slums in the city, and if there is no space right now, and if I'm saying in 18 months time, I'm gonna build a toilet for them, where is the space coming from? So it has to co-work with some of the other Government of India programs, such as slum redevelopment program. So we are relocating all these people to 1 BHK houses where there is a provision of toilet. That is how we're going to progress from ODF to ODF plus. So you should never see something as a vertical thing. It's always horizontal. So
Right.
These are some of the things we're trying to do.
Okay, we have another 10 minutes. We'll be taking questions. We have a lot of questions coming in, but before we move to Dhaka and what's happening there, could you talk to us about some tips that you would have for large cities in Asia on how they could start working towards issues like this? What comes to the top of your mind when it comes to implementation? I mean, that's the challenge.
I guess, as I said, in contrast to the other cities here today, we are fortunate to have 95% plus sewer network. Probably that is not the case with all other cities. So your initial planning at a city-wide enterprise planning, this is a must. So when you're giving a building permit to any new, in a new structure, this has to be part of that approval. It has to be built. So one, that, and two, there has to be capacities built, the processing capacity. So for example, I hear Dhaka is having 20 to 30% of sewer network. So that gives to a different kind of challenge, which has to be addressed differently. But moving forward, you should have centralized networks. Two, there has to be, as I said, we have to cultivate the habit of people paying for the facilities that they use. Cities cannot forever deliver sanitation services as a cost to them. There has to be sustainable business models, evolve in this. So we are trying to do some of these things. We're trying to evolve some of the innovative entrepreneurial models, because the guys who we have outsourced our operations and maintenance today, especially of the community toilets, we're trying to help them generate alternative revenue streams by way of advertising, by setting up kiosks of water there, by setting up e-commerce delivery kiosks there, by setting up a little insurance guys who. There are different things we're trying to see to make this entire thing sustainable.
Right.
They cannot be at a cost to city. And
Right.
two, the cities need to imbibe in their thinking that you should not analyze the benefits of sanitation only in terms of the costs and the revenues or the profits. You have to understand the what I would say, the complementary consequences of bettering sanitation. As Professor Sitaraman from ADB, we're fortunate to have him here. He says when you hit a 40% coverage of sanitation in any particular geography, it's bound to have multiple effects on things. Probably it will reduce healthcare costs as a city. Probably it will decongest some of your roads. So at least my learning here is that we need to look everything through a holistic mirror in understanding what benefits it can generate in other management departments of the city. Only then you will come to understand the value of furthering this architecture.
Right. No, I mean, this is something that I've seen in other sectors too. You can't really look at it just as a sanitation or just as solid waste management, because it kind of, when it comes to the city implementation of solutions, they don't just deal with this. They're dealing with a whole lot of issues together combinedly. So totally agree with that. And when you said the financing can't be from the city, I think you mean not about the responsibility, but more like because of the availability of funds, this is a better, we should look for better financing opportunities where they're much more self-sustainable.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So now moving to Jeremy and Habib. A lot of questions for you guys. First one is from Amrita. She is asking if you purchased new trucks or used trucks. Amrita, I think Jeremy and Habib mentioned earlier that these 2 vacuum trucks were donated by UNICEF, and the capital expenses were from UNICEF, and now the OPEX is completely covered by the operator, and he's profitable now. But the question continues. Amrita is asking, what challenges did you face in putting the service level agreement together? Habib, do you want to take it?
Yeah, actually, so this is it's not service agreement. It's a lease agreement, actually, performance-based lease agreement. So the challenge was that it's a fecal sludge. It's a some sort of business that the pit MTR. It's a lower class caste. The people can do this business with dignity or something like that. So yeah, a lot of investors are there in Dhaka, and that time we tried to invest the investor in this sector, but they little bit feel shy that why we'll do this sort of business and how the other people will accept this. That was the major challenge. And another challenge, the enabling environment within the utility and the city authority. So this is completely new thing that how the private sector will involve this business, and how they will manage it, because the city authority don't have management capacity on the PPP arrangement, or that those were challenges actually. But we did consultation with both the parties, private operator and the city authority, and then finally we were able to overcome the challenges.
Okay.
Can I just add to that? Is that possible? Just it was really interesting working with the city authorities to work through what their financial structures could be and how they could accept a lease type agreement, because they were initially quite reserved about working with the private sector. So it was interesting to work with them. At our latest, so we had different pricing points as well for the lease. So we were looking at a repayment type basis. We are not yet at a place where they are ring fencing the money, because we thought if they could ring fence the money, then they could purchase a new vacuum tanker after 5 to 7 years. So that's something that we're also working on. So looking forwards, we've also been talking to them a little bit about a performance-based contract. So if we set different targets for the private entrepreneur, both about the amount of fecal sludge and the amount of low-income customers, would we be able to have a different pricing structure so that if they didn't serve any low-income customers, it would be purely on a repayment type basis. But if they served multiple low-income customers, in essence, there would be a lower lease rate because the entrepreneur would be providing a public service. So we're still in that type of discussion. We haven't got to a place where we can start that performance type contract, but it's an interesting place to set our sights on and to be moving towards, I think.
Okay. We had a question from Nikhil asking the challenges of sustainability of this model that you're using in Dhaka. But I think what you mentioned now kind of answers that question. And he was also asking if you see a stable income while taking into account the future rise in O&M costs. I think you've also responded to that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Jeremy, I think I'm really would like to focus on making it universal access to sanitation. And I know that you're in the midst of that. Could you talk about the challenges that you're facing right now, Habib or Jeremy, either one of you?
So
Go.
yeah, major challenge is the sustain the demand actually. In Dhaka, most of the septic tank are somehow connected to local surface drain or surface drain or open water bodies. So this is one thing, and the standard of the septic tank. So we have a BNBC in Bangladesh National Building Code. So the landlord is supposed to follow, but due to lack of force of city authority, so still there is a room for improvement of standard regarding the containment structure. That's one thing. So most of the septic tank are connected somehow to surface drain. So sustainable demand is the challenge to sustain the demand. So one thing, and another thing, the safe disposal. So if you want to achieve the SDG 6, that is, you have to ensure the safe disposal as well. So the entrepreneur, so operator, they actually do this sort of job. I mean, the emptying job at night time, and we have some monitoring mechanism, but still we need to develop something motivational tools for the operator so that they feel more encouraged to dispose the sludge in the right disposal place. So this is another challenge actually for us.
Okay. All right. Interesting. We have only 2 minutes to go for this. So any comments from you have to be really short. Gautam, I think this is a question for you from Vedanti. She's asking for megacities provision of land and adequate space for installing STPs in dense areas is a challenge. In the case of the question is for Dhaka, but I'm asking it to you because you also established. So you're trying to establish an STP now. So in the case of Pune, how did it work out? The land issue, and did you use any innovative techniques to get access to the land?
No, I guess these concerns are on the table long before and you and me started thinking about these things. So we already have 11 STPs and we're setting up 10 more STPs actually. But what you do is every city has as a planning structures. For example, Pune city develops a city development plan every 10 years, right? So you develop a plan is an all-order, generating proposal, and then you get it approved by state government. So while you're developing your DP, that is the development plan, you need to earmark, factoring in the rise in the population, and the rise in the generation of your sewerage, and all these things for the next 10 years, and try to understand what is the kind of space that you require, and you have to reserve some of these public amenity spaces in your development plan. If there is not available, you need to acquire land. And that is when generally things go into legal and take a long time to come out. But fortunately, Pune has a record of preserving some of the amenity spaces for some of these STPs, not only STPs, for even public toilets.
Okay.
But most of the times what happens is, even when you reserve a land, when it's legally preserved for this particular purpose, there is always an opposition from the citizens around, especially in case of wet waste processing plants, or in case of public toilets, because of legacy issues, the maintenance, and the smelly places. So it's a challenge in terms of getting the buy-in of the public around to put some of these plants there after you have a space. And yeah, we are working in some of those dimensions too. So it's not if you have a land, you need to have consumer rate funding, consumer rate buy-in from the stakeholders, and your supply demand architecture in place to make this a success. But yes, you need to incorporate in your central planning. I mean, public amenity space is the primary concern of any development plan. You have to factor in, considering on the rate of urbanization that's happening, you need to factor in these things, and you need to incorporate in your planning. There is no other way.
Right, great. We're already a minute over time, so thank you so much, Gautam, for joining us. And Habib and Jeremy, do you have any final points to mention before we end the conversation?
I will be very quick, but I would say one of the key things that we found that was really a driver or a catalyst for change was making sure there's absolute clarity in the mandate of the government. There's not enough time to talk about that now, but that was a large amount of work that was done just because it de-risked the architecture, it de-risked the environment for both the contractor or the entrepreneur to get involved, and for the local government, because they knew it was their responsibility as well. So just to add that in.
Great. Habib?
Yeah, so actually the institutional regulatory framework, so that was approved by ministry last year. So that was the same as in for us to motivate the city authority to manage the land for our treatment plan in 3 cities. So already we have started, work there. But my, message is that if you want to introduce the FSM service in full scale in the city, like Dhaka, so you need a appropriate regulatory institution framework, and of course the citywide plan, and that is helpful for the investor, IFIs. So there will be the appropriate financing mechanism. And another thing, if you want to establish, the effective service delivery, so you need a separate unit within the city. So that is from my end.
Okay, great, wonderful. Thank you so much, Habib. Thanks, Jeremy, for joining us. Now we'll move on to Josephine. And before that, I just wanted to mention that the way international interventions and aid works has changed quite a bit these days. Initially, it was more focused on giving financing, but now, getting some financing together, going to a city, and then asking them to, come up with a project. But now I think it has changed quite a bit in the sense that there is a lot of groundwork being done before financing is even offered. So I think that's something that we have to understand how it has changed. So now we'll move on to our interview with Josephine Antonio. She is joining us from Dumaguete, Philippines, and she was the pivotal person in implementing the citywide sanitation process, citywide sanitation system for Dumaguete City in Philippines, and the system is already financially sustainable. So we'll hear more about it from her. Josephine, welcome to Be Waste Wise. How are you?
Thank you.
Great. Could you talk to us a little bit about? Could you give us some background about the city? And what was the situation before your project started, and what happened later?
Okay. Dumaguete is a coastal city. It's like there could be about 1,000 cities in the Philippines similar to Dumaguete. It's a coastal city of about 135,000 people. We're small in contrast to Dhaka and Pune. We're a very small city. You talk about millions. Here we have a population of 135,000, or about 28,000 households. So way back before the septage management system was implemented, there was one private dislodger, and he would dislodge from house to house, and we wouldn't know where he would take the sludge or the septage. He would just dispose them everywhere. So it was a problem then, because we also wanted to preserve the quality of our sea or our boulevard. We have a nice boulevard fronting the sea, and we wanted to present, or rather to restore its quality. So way back in 2004, that's almost years ago, I was still working with the city government then. We had an invitation from the USAID to join in a program, sanitation program, wherein USAID would assist local government units like cities, municipalities, put up low-cost treatment facilities. So Dumaguete was selected. 3 other cities in the country were also selected, but Dumaguete was one of the 4. So that was way back in 2004. And just like any project, we always started with assessing our situation or doing a community situational analysis in terms of sources of pollution in our community, the role of the community, and then we talked about solutions. This was very important. We had to involve the community in our deliberations, in our consultative meetings, get them involved so they could eventually own up the project. So we did a situational analysis, and we found out that septage was the biggest source of potential and existing and current sources of pollution. So we thought of technical solutions then. We could do a sewerage system, which is really beyond our financial capacity. So we thought of that too, and then we thought of doing nothing at all. That's also a solution. And then we thought of doing a fecal FSM system, or we call it septage management system in the Philippines. So we thought about those. Those are possible technical solutions, but we also had to think about the economy of it. Could we really sustain it? How are we going to sustain the system? So we had to think of a tariff system which could support the system in the coming years, operational cost and capital cost. And we also thought of how do we get the community involved? What do we inform the community? We had to get the community involved. So we had to do a social marketing program as well. So that was also critical, because we had to get the support of the community, because we're thinking of tariff in the future. So we had to explain to them that the thing is going to cost us, but we'll keep the cost down. And we also had to put to work on legislation to give it the project legal personality. Otherwise, there would be no legal basis for collecting tariff fees. So that was done. We had a local ordinance to establish the septage management system and the tariff system as well. And we also invited the water utility company. This is a government-owned corporation, to work with the city government, because we felt that the responsibility of maintaining water quality does not really belong to the city government alone. It belongs to the water district, because they provide us they provide the water to the community. So there was formed a partnership between the city government and the water utility company. We call it water district. So there was a memorandum of agreement between the two, and under the agreement, the city government would put up 50% of the capital cost, and the water district would also put up 50% of the capital cost.
Mm-hmm.
So we started with a capital cost of about $500,000.
Okay.
So that was way back in 2005 or 2008. And then we started, during all this time, USAID technical staff assisted us. We did not receive any financial contribution from USAID. They provided technical assistance. So financial capital cost was provided by the city government and the water utility company. So we started constructing the treatment plant in late 2008. and completed the construction in mid-2010.
Okay.
And in mid-2010, we started operation, fully operational. We started with just 2 vacuum trucks, but we now have about 8 vacuum trucks.
Okay.
And we're now operating full capacity of 80 cubic meters per day. How do we get the tariff? We call it environmental fee. For every cubic meter of water you consume, you pay about 4 US cents. 4
Okay.
US cents.
And that's on the water meter.
That's on the water bill. Okay. So every time you pay your water bill, you also pay your septates fee.
This is for the sanitation. I had a question about the USAID model of intervention. So they didn't come to you and then ask you to work on sanitation, but they actually came to you and asked you for what kind of work you would like to do. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, they assisted us, but then decisions had to be done by the city government or the community. They were just guiding us to the process of planning for it. They never told us what to do. It's really up to the city government, to the community to decide on what you would like to do with your septic system.
Okay.
So they provided technical assistance.
Friends, I'm sorry about the background noise. We'll make
I'm
sure
sorry.
We'll make sure that doesn't happen again. But yeah.
There's a car.
Please go on. Continue with what you're saying.
So we started operating middle of 2010, and we collected tariff fees.
When did the process start? When did USAID approach you, and what was the driving force? Who or what was the change agent behind all of this?
The agent of change was really the city mayor. He was a very great mayor then. He really wanted a sanitation system that was affordable and the one that could be supported by the community.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from almost all of you is that the leadership generally comes from the city administration. And
Yes.
So if any one of you are watching and if you are the city mayor, then this is your opportunity, to make it big, sanitation. If you're not, but you do work with someone, show them these videos, and then maybe it will inspire change. So Josephine, please continue. Could you talk to us about how you provided universal access? Did you start with it right away? Did you start with the entire infrastructure right away, or did you actually start with something and then build it up?
No, we actually, referring to the waste treatment plant, we built it full capacity immediately. I mean, we didn't do it in stages. We had to build it for the design capacity of 80 cubic meters per day. And we started out with only 2 vacuum trucks. And with the income from the tariff fees, we were able to buy more trucks. But these are small trucks, like 2 cubic meters, 5 cubic meter trucks.
Okay. And sorry, go ahead.
So we are financially sustainable. In fact, the city government was able to recover its capital cost in 6 years. So I think we're making good in terms of collecting septage fees and financial management.
Okay. Could you talk to us about the operation of this? How are the private sector? How is the private sector involved? Do they do all of the operations for this vacuum trucks, or is it done by the city?
Under the agreement with the water utility company, the city government takes care of operating the waste treatment plant.
Okay.
And the water utility company takes care of the sludging and transporting septage to the treatment plant. So we have divided the work. The city government takes care of operating the treatment plant, and the water utility company takes care of collecting septage, transporting it to the treatment plant, and collecting the tariff fees, and taking care of the finances. So every year, the water utility company prepares a financial statement showing income, expenses, and any net profit the end of every year.
Okay.
So we have been collecting profit, so to speak.
Okay. And go ahead.
And the profit, if there's any, is shared equally between the water utility company and the city government.
Okay. Has this model, the model that you've implemented, has it been used in other cities in Philippines?
We've had many visitors to Dumaguete and learning about our system, and this has been replicated in some towns already. So we've heard of towns putting up systems similar to what we have after their visits to Dumaguete.
Okay.
And we are slowly expanding to adjacent towns which don't have any FSM, and helping them with their septic tanks.
Right. Who does that work come under? I mean, is it again under the sewerage authority or the water authority? And so expanding to other towns.
Expansion to other towns, they do it on their own. I mean, there's a national agency, the Department of Health. There are national building codes. There's also a sanitation code, but these are not often implemented. So it's really up to the local government to prioritize sanitation and environmental matters. So
Okay. All right.
You're very much on your own.
And so if someone has to start this process over, from the beginning, what are the important things that they should gather? Definitely buy-in from the city leadership, because that seems to be extremely important. But what other steps should they take to get to a place like this? And what's the timeline that they're looking at?
Well, for us, this was the first project in the whole Philippines. Our timeline is really rather long. Our gestation period was rather long, like 4 years. It took us a while to really start constructing the facilities, because we had to do massive information campaign, getting the permit from the village where the treatment plant was going to be located. That was a big issue then. I mean, nobody wanted a treatment plant in his village. So that was a big issue then, but we were able to convince the village to allow us to put up the treatment plant in their village. That was a major issue then.
How did you convince them? What was the process?
Okay. We had to bring the village officials to Manila, show them what treatment plants are, how they operate, the cost involved. So we had to bring them to different treatment plants in Manila, but unfortunately, those were mechanized systems. What we have in Dumaguete is our anaerobic ponds, facultative ponds, natural processes or passive systems. It's not mechanized at all.
Okay.
So that has also had to be explained to the village officials or elders that treatment plants are safe.
Right. And that was enough for them, or were there also any kind of jobs or development in the area offered part of it?
The city government entered into an agreement with the village that the city government or the system would give them about $20,000 a year to support environmental projects. So they get about $20,000 a year, and it is used by the village to put up sanitation facilities, environmental programs, medical facilities, and also assistance for college students. We call them college scholarships. So those are used for various purposes. It's not used for salaries at all, but rather for programs for the environment, health, and infrastructure. And it is closely monitored by the city government.
Okay. All right. Great. So, friends, you're watching the first event organized by ADBI and Be Wastewise on sanitation. And people are already asking questions using the chat box below. If you haven't already done so, just scroll down, exit the full screen, scroll down, you'll see the chat box, and then you can ask questions there. Josephine, we have a very good question from Nikhil. He's asking, after almost a decade of operating sanitation facilities, what are some of the visible changes in the city? Has the city seen benefits in terms of new residents moving in or new businesses moving in?
I think you're talking about spillover effect of sanitation. Like, is there really a link between sanitation and economic growth of a community that is being studied or should be studied? Is there really a spillover effect of sanitation to the growth of a community?
Yeah,
There
that's
are
what I'm.
changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. That's I think that's the subject of a future study. Is there really a spillover effect of sanitation on the economy of a community? Yeah, I think that would be a good study.
Okay. So, all right. We have a question from Habib, who was our panelist. He's asking how is the environmental charge collected, and you said it was part of the water fee.
Okay, every month you get your water bill, and on
Right.
your water bill it says how much water you used, and then there is also a corresponding fee for septage management. Like if you use 20 cubic meters of water for the month, multiply it by 2 pesos, then you pay 40 pesos for septage fee. And that's being collected every month. If you do not pay your water bill, if you do not want to pay your septage fee, they will simply cut off your water because, it's attached to your water bill.
Right. And I've seen this arrangement in other cities where, let's say sanitation fee or solid waste management fee is put in the water bill or in the electricity bill. And then one of the and then the board, whether it's the water board or sewerage board, which collects the fee, then has a mechanism in which it transfers all of that amount that is collected for this service to the agency which does that service, whether it's sanitation or solid waste authority. Is that how it works in Dumaguete too?
Yeah, the city government is its share of the fee for environmental programs like purchase of toilets, etc., or putting up drainage systems or buying more garbage trucks. So it's really intended for sanitation or environmental programs. It's never used for constructing roads.
Okay. Josephine, there is a lot of background noise. Is that
it's
from
the cicada or it's the cicada.
Okay. Oh, wow. All right. Great. We have guests to the panel. There is a question from Martin. He's asking, is any community using vacuum trucks run on electricity or biofuels? In your experience, have you seen any of these?
No.
Okay. All right. So we're not there yet. Josephine?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
So the question was, is any community using vacuum trucks which are run on electricity or biofuels?
No, they run on diesel fuel.
Oh, okay, on diesel fuel. Okay, all right. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to mention before we end the interview?
Nothing much, but except for small cities that who are reluctant to put up sanitation facilities, they could replicate what Dumaguete did. I mean, it takes a while, but if the mayor really wants to do it, it can be done. And capital costs can easily be recovered. If they're worried about finances, you can set up a tariff system, make it sustainable.
Okay, so sanitation is really low-hanging fruit for cities around Asia, where you could implement solutions in a very short amount of time, like our previous panelists mentioned. And you could also, it's a big political win, but it's also a big public health and environmental win for the citizens. So, friends, thanks for joining us today. And I think with this, we can end the event. organized by the Asian Development Bank Institute, Be Waste Wise with the support of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So Josephine, do you have any final remarks before we end it?
No.
Okay, all right, wonderful, great. Thank you very much.
You.
Thanks for joining us.